If you're looking for a way to create a glow effect that you can shrink and scale over the surface of your character in Unity, here's an approach you could try. So first we're going to head on over to Blender, and I've got my character here. He's in a T-pose. It's important that he's in a T-pose because that's going to make it easy for me to do the next step, which is grabbing the UV layout of the arms. The target of my effects is going to be the arms, and I already have them as separate objects, so this should be pretty straightforward. First thing I'm going to do is just make an exact copy of them so that they're overlapping the original arms. Rename them to something helpful like arms effects. And then we'll go into their UVs. Now this kind of UV layout you're seeing on the left, this is standard for a character, but is not what we're looking for. What we need is for this UV layout to sort of go from top to bottom so that when we apply a gradient over it, it's going to look like parts of it are fading in and out. It's hard to visualize this, so I'm just going to do it and you guys can see for yourselves. I'm going to hit U and I'm going to project from view. And this is already closer to what we're looking for. Since we're just creating an effect and this won't be used for any actual texturing, we can get away with having messy UVs. We can have overlaps. I'm actually going to take advantage of overlapping here to just combine the two. I'm going to rotate it so that the hands face downwards and then scale it up so that it takes up most of that UV tile. All right, that should be all I need. Once that's done, I'm going to hit export and I'm going to export it into my Unity project. So you can see back in Unity, it loaded my character and I brought him in. You see that we have the arms and we have that new object we created, which is arms effects. And it's using the same shader as the body, which is why it looks exactly the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a texture, a shader, and a material, and we're going to put those together. First thing we need is some sort of gradient that will help us to fade between visible and invisible areas of the mesh. I'm going to create a new file, and we just make it 1K by 1K, keep the resolution kind of high. I'm going to create a new layer, get rid of the default one. So this is a transparent background now. Next, I'm going to use a gradient. The shortcut for that is G, but it might also be your paint bucket. So just double check. Under the gradients, we can pick out like any kind of gradient we want. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to go with this one that seems to fade from white to transparent. I'm just going to hold down my shift key and drag that gradient down. And that should be all we need. The top part will be opaque and the bottom part will be transparent. Or wait, actually, we should probably do it the other way around. Just kidding. We're going to do it the other way around because we faced the hands towards the bottom and we want the hands to be the opaque part. So I'm actually going to do it backwards. There we go. Last thing to do is just to save this out. Not to Creative Cloud, but to my computer. I don't like that it keeps asking me to save to the cloud. That's superfluous to the program. I'm gonna set the format to PNG. Make sure it's something that supports transparency. I'm gonna call it gradient. All right, and now let's go bring our gradient into Unity. There it is. For the whole transparency thing to work, you want to make sure this checkbox alpha is transparency is enabled. We're going to apply that, and now you can see the fading. Next thing I need is a custom shader that I'm going to create using URP shader graph. So this is going to be the lit shader graph. Let's name it something like glow. I'm going to double click it so that we can edit it in this window. This doesn't seem to be a transparent shader right off the bat, but we can fix that by setting its surface type to transparent. And if this main preview is just like a blue circle and is not showing you your results, you can just click on it to refresh it. But as you can see, setting it to alpha, or to transparent rather, has created this alpha input for us. And what we want here is that new gradient we created. So I learned that you can just drag and drop the images into the graph and it kind of sets it up accordingly. So from that gradient, we're just going to grab the alpha. We don't really care about the color at this stage. And I like to put in an add node here. Now you'll notice with the add node, if I scrub the other value up and down, it kind of moves the cutoff point for the gradient. So I'm going to create a property called offset, and we're going to feed that offset into this add node instead. So the last thing we got to do is we got to save our asset so that it applies to any materials we assign it to. So I'm going to create that new material now. We're going to call it heat glow. And instead of using the default shader, we're going to use the shader we just created. And let's see how that looks. I'm going to drag it onto the arms effects. Doesn't look all that different, but I think if I turn off the arms, you can see that it is indeed transparent. It is also really shiny, which is going to detract from the effect. So for the smoothness value, we'll just say 0. All right, so now we have an alpha value that can be moved up and down using that offset that we created. So you see the arms sort of fade in and out now. That's good, that's going to help us. But instead of the color just being this flat black, what we want is for that part of the mesh to glow. So we're going to make use of the emission here, and we're going to feed that a value that the user can control. So I created a new color property, and just for fun, I'm going to set the mode to HDR so we can get that nice glowing, blooming effect. And we'll feed that into the emission. Set a nice default value, some sort of orange here. All right. And you can see the arms are kind of glowing throughout. They're glowing even in the parts that are supposed to be transparent. And that's because this is just a flat color value. What we could do is take the output from our gradient and we could multiply it with the color. And this makes it so that that color only shows up on parts that are visible. Now I have something that I can fade in and out over the surface. So one thing we might notice with this shader is that the parts that aren't lit have this color that we don't really want interfering with the base color of the arms. And this is most likely because in the graph settings for this shader, it's still trying to preserve the specular lighting. And in this case, we want to turn that off so that we don't see any of those remnant colors. All right, and this is starting to look pretty cool to me. So I'm going to turn on the base arms, and then we can play around with these values and see how it looks on top of the arms. So you have an offset here to move the graph in and out. You also have this color parameter to make the glow brighter or less bright, or to change it to a different color. I mean for this to be a sort of heat glow effect, so I'm going to leave it at orange and I'm going to leave it fairly bright. And you'll see that since we're using the material approach, the effect sort of follows when you play an animation on your character. So I'm going to leave the tutorial there. I'm pretty happy with these results. And you can see that the graph that we had to set up was only a couple of nodes here. So it's pretty easy to get this sort of effect going. Thanks for watching.